Well, all right, folks. How's it going? As you know, my name is Jay, and it is my pleasure to be speaking to you all here today. Music. Where would I be without music? As a musician, I have to use my imagination 24/7. I have to allow myself to be sensitive to all thoughts that come my way. I can never afford to shut off my imagination. So I ask you all this very important question: where would we be in a world without imagination? What would we be doing with ourselves if nobody had had thoughts or ideas that have paved the way for us in today's society? Think about literature. Think about music. Think about all the big ideas and all the innovations that have come our way. Without somebody's single thought, that none of those would have been made possible. Medical interventions, technological advances, anything that we know and have witnessed today would not be possible had it not come from somebody's single thought. Now, my personal experience with the idea of imagination and creativity and all things to do with imagination. As a child, I was very isolated and I was always in myself, and I didn't have many friends growing up, and I stuck to myself in my own bubble, and music and literature and all things creative was what brought me out of that. When I was very, very young, my grandfather purchased my first guitar for me, and it really did change my life for the better. He bought me a basic nylon string, your standard guitar. And this guitar was the thing that was able to bring me out of that confinement, of that isolation. This simple instrument where I could use my imagination and be vulnerable to the idea of imagination. Hadn't it been for that guitar, I probably would not be speaking to you today, because I would not have been able to come outside the box and out of myself in that isolated space. My mother, she's a big reader. She loves to read. She has thousands, hundreds of books. She has all the books, you name it, she has it. She inspired me to start reading and allow myself again to have ideas and be thankful and flourish with my imagination. It got me into creative writing, and it allowed me to be able to voice my opinion and be able to speak to you here today. Creativity and imagination brought me out of myself, and it allowed me to be more confident, and it allowed me to do things that I never thought was possible. Think about lockdown, for example. Where would we be in lockdown had we not had the radio, television shows, books, literature, art, anything? What would we have done without somebody's creative mind and imagination providing these different things for us? Where would we be without music, without books, without anything? I know I would still be stuck in that bubble that I was in, isolated from society and not thinking outside the box. I would still be stuck there had it not been for literature or art or any of the above. My grandmother was an artist. She loved drawing, she loved sketching, and even in her last days on this earth, she was still constantly speaking about art or music or just anything that she knew I had an interest in that she also had an interest in. She passed her creative knowledge from one generation down to me. So that's why I am so passionate about the idea of being creative and the idea of music and everything. That's why I am the way that I am in terms of that. I really don't know where I would be if I didn't get that guitar. If I wasn't encouraged by my mother to start reading, or if I wasn't encouraged by my grandmother to be creative in terms of art. I really don't know where I would be without that. And I don't know about the rest of you. I don't know where you would be if you didn't have creative things to get you through the day. Think about lockdown again for another example, because I know it's such a huge thing that all of us had to kind of go through. The medical advances, the technological advances, anything, all the big ideas that have come from lockdown, they all started with a single thought. somebody's imagination. Somebody had to nurture that and care for that thought and develop it into something much bigger. And it all started with just a small thought, an imaginative thought. Where would we be if nobody had these thoughts? If nobody had these ideas? We'd be so stuck, we'd be so far behind, and we would not be moving forward in day-to-day life without these imaginative thoughts. That's why imagination is so important. There's a whole song based around it. John Lennon, Imagine. It's such a big hit. And he's right. Imagine all the things that are possible. Just allow yourself to be open to the idea of imagination, and allow yourself to be vulnerable, and allow yourself to be sensitive, because little ideas and little bits of imagination that you have going on in there, it could lead to so many great things that you won't even realize at the time. Music, definitely, and imagination definitely helped me become the person I am today. I'm a lot more confident. Had it not been for music, I would not be as confident as I am today. Had it not been for sticking my head in a book, or sticking my head in a piece of art, or just sticking my earphones in when the rest of the world was going bad. Had it not been for somebody coming up with these books, or with this piece of music, or this artwork, I'd still be isolated, and I wouldn't be able to be myself if it wasn't for all these great ideas. Music has helped me to come out of my shell, and has allowed me to develop myself as a better person, and has allowed me to do things that I didn't even think was possible. I've done numerous gigs. I've met so many great people through music and through being creative and allowing myself to be creative. As a musician, I can never switch my brain off. I always have to be on the ball, thinking on my feet especially. I can never switch off my brain to the ideas and to the creativity that comes to me every single day. I have to be sensitive to that. And I would encourage you all to also be sensitive to that, because you never know from one small idea what could come from that. And I know that personally, because had it not been for one small idea in terms of a piece of music or something that I decided to write down in a book, I don't know where I would be. My grandmother's art especially is a big thing that sits with me, is the idea of being able to express through art. And I think art especially is such a beautiful thing, and I really do credit those who are able to come up with such expressive ideas and be able to think about such unreal pieces of art that we find ourselves looking at every single day, whether it be in the street or on TV, or even the newspaper art or pieces of art in literature. Art is definitely something that I find myself looking at like, wow, that is really, really beautiful. And somebody had to use their imagination to come up with that. Somebody thought of that amazing piece of art. It was a single thought, and somebody thought about that and put it on to paper, and I think that's amazing. I think definitely being sensitive to ideas. Ideas come all the time. You have to, creativity is a concept. Everybody has ideas. It's just a matter of catching that idea and being able to use it before somebody else does. And I think that's why being sensitive to imagination and being sensitive to topics like that, it's not a bad thing. Because if you don't snatch up that idea, somebody else will, and somebody else will take your idea. And that's why creativity is it's such a touchy subject, because everybody has ideas. And that, even though that might be a bad thing for somebody, everybody has ideas, It might be a bad thing for some people, but I think it is beautiful in the fact that we all think, and we can all be united in the power of thought and thinking about certain things. Thought is such a huge thing, and the idea of thought for me, again, on a personal level, I'm always in my head. I'm always thinking about certain things. I'm never out of my own head. I'm always thinking, and that's not a bad thing, because I can think of new ways to do things, and I can think about how to be outside the box. And you do get people, your head's always in the clouds. You're always daydreaming. I'm like, that's not a bad thing. Being sensitive to thoughts and always thinking, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Some people may disagree, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I'm always thinking about new ways to do things, new ways to approach situations, and I think that's really, really important, especially today, being able to think about new ways to do things and being able to come up on the spot and approach things in new ways and have different approaches to certain things. I think that's really, really important. Being able, and the concept of thinking outside the box is something that sits with me. If I hadn't have thought outside the box when I was going through that isolated time of my life, or when I was being bullied, or when things weren't going right, especially during the pandemic, if I wasn't thinking outside the box, and if nobody had thought outside the box, we wouldn't have moved forward. And I wouldn't have moved forward on a personal level had I not developed the habit of thinking outside the box and using my imagination to help me move things forward. Music and literature and art and all of those really, truly have helped me to think outside the box. And I don't know what I would do if I was still stuck in the mindset I was 2 or 3, 4 years ago. I would still be very upset. I would be depressed. I would be anxious. I would be all the negative emotions that you can think of if I wasn't able to think outside the box, and if I wasn't able to mentally move myself up to that next level of overlooking everything that's already been set in stone and just seeing over that, seeing over what people have told you the way to think is, overseeing that. And I think a lot of people could definitely benefit from thinking outside the box. I know that there are societal constructs and ways that we should think and ways that we are taught to thought and feel from no age. I know there are certain ways we are told to think and certain ways we are told to thought and feel that is drilled into our heads from such a young age. I know that's the case for people because it was the case for me. From a young age, I was told to think this way, do things this way, to do things that way. You know, you can only feel a certain way or think a certain way. You know, this way of thinking is wrong. I had to completely retrain my brain to overthink certain societal constructs or certain ways of thinking, and it has done me the world of good. I've been able to accomplish so much more and embrace myself so much more by thinking outside the box and by overcoming all these things that people have told me to think and that this is the correct way to think. I've had to oversee that. And I think a lot of people need to sit down and think, is this the way that we should be thinking? Because at the end of the day, it's not. There are so many different ways of thinking that are not taught to us. And I think music and being creative and being sensitive to your ideas and being sensitive to one's thoughts can overcome not being able to think outside the box, and it can overcome being stuck in a certain mindset that you didn't think was possible to overcome. Take anybody that suffers from a mental illness. The way in which their brain is programmed can be very hard to rewire, and thinking outside the box might not necessarily be an option for some people, and that's okay. I understand certain people's brains are wired a certain way, and that can be very hard to change. But music therapy would not be an option for people that have wired their brains a certain way if it was not effective. Music therapy wouldn't be such a wide treatment used now throughout the world if music did not have some kind of impact in the way in which we see the world and the way in which we are taught to think and the way in which we do think. Art would not be an option to people to view if it did not have some kind of good impact on their mental state. I think so much and so many flaws within society can be solved through thinking outside the box and through, well, music. Music in itself helps people think outside the box. I think if we all listened to more music and if we all allowed ourselves to be vulnerable to different creative thoughts that we have and different thoughts that are constantly coming through our head, if we just catch those thoughts and be vulnerable and be sensitive to thoughts and allow ourselves to really think about things in a different way, I think so many things would be a lot better now in society if people thought that way. If we just listened to more music and if we allowed ourselves to be more creative through listening to music and art and reading books and anything, I think thinking outside the box would be more recognised throughout society, and I think that could have a great impact on all of us. I have a good relationship with one of my teachers at my school. He's my English teacher, and I've got a very good relationship with him. And it is him that has helped me develop my love for creative writing and my love of literature. And I've just been able to really bond with him over the idea of writing things and just reading and just anything to do with literature. I've been able to bond with him over that. And even in that, bonding with somebody, like a teacher, a member of staff, and being able to have a relationship with them that wasn't necessarily possible, it makes all the difference. And that is through literature, and it is through being creative, and it is through both of us allowing ourselves to be sensitive to ideas and being sensitive to creativity when it comes our way. I've got such a good relationship with him now, and it really has changed how my day-to-day goes throughout school. Something as simple as having a connection with somebody because you bonded over something like literature or anything like that. It makes all the difference, having a connection with somebody. And that goes to say for everybody. I'm sure we found ourselves having connections with people that we didn't necessarily think we would have connections with because we bonded through creative things. And we bonded over having these creative things to get us through the day or to get us through lockdown or to get us through anything. And connections are so important, and connections are based around thinking outside the box and thinking about this person and think, how do I feel about this person? It is all coming down to your imagination and being able to think about certain things. I'm sure there are times throughout the day you have multiple thoughts and you don't even realize how creative you are being and that you are using your imagination. Simple things like the human connection involves imagination so much because we are able to bond with people through music and through art and through literature. Everything we know comes down to imagination. Everything I've previously listed and anything we all know, it all comes down to people's thoughts and feelings, which deprives from their imagination. It all comes from their imagination. Imagination is such a great thing, and it has helped me in the ways that I've just listed to you this afternoon. So, to go away with today, I would encourage you all to either pick up an instrument or pick up on that book that you have meant to write but you have left lying for months, or pursue that invention that you have brewing. Connect with people over art and literature, and do not be scared to be sensitive to your ideas and to your imagination, because you never know where it might lead you or what it could pull you out of if you just be sensitive to your imagination. Thank you all very, very much for coming to my TED Talk.